Alright, this is a quick video for your algebra review page to just go over a couple more of the rules for exponents. So the two rules we're looking at today is first what happens when you divide them. So if you have x to the m divided by x to the n, when you're dividing, the rule with the exponents, they get a special rule, is you're going to subtract them. The one other major thing that you need to be aware of is if you have a negative exponent. If you have a negative exponent, no answer is simplified with a negative exponent in the final answer. You always have to make sure that you move it. So the rule with negative exponents is they move. If it's on the top, it moves to the bottom. If it's on the bottom, it actually would move to the top. So if you look at number 1, we're dividing between those two. So since we're dividing, these two numbers are going to get subtracted. So I'm going to do 7 minus 2, and I'm going to get x to the 5th power. My one warning when we get to something like number 2 is just make sure the big numbers, you still do the actual math rule there. The big numbers we're supposed to be dividing, so you want to do 18 divided by 3 still. 18 divided by 3 is 6. But then when you get to the exponents, the exponent you use an exponent rule on. So these two, since they're exponents, they get a special rule. We're going to subtract them. So that's going to be x to the 12th power. So that's your answer. Let's look at a few more. Something like number 3, we now have two different variables, so it's only the ones that are the same variable that you can actually subtract. My rule here, when we look at these two, is I subtract just from biggest to smallest. So I'm going to do 8 minus 3, but then your final answer has to stay where the biggest one was. So A would stay on the bottom to the 5th power. Then we're going to look at the b's, and for the b's, I'm going to do 7 minus 4. Again, I like to start with the biggest one. 7 minus 4 is 3, but that's going to stay on the top because that's where the bigger b was. So that would be your answer there. Alright, looking at number 4, we have a negative exponent. Only the thing with the negative exponent needs to move, so we're going to move that down and it becomes a to the 4th power. Similarly, in number 5, we have a negative exponent. The thing with a negative exponent has to move, so that's going to, since it's on the bottom, it's actually going to move up. So it's going to be 8b to the 2nd power. So that's all you have to do with problems like that. Now we're going to look at some problems that have negative exponents that we have to do an operation with. So actually 6, I'm going to show you two options right now. For 6, since you're dividing, you could just subtract. You can do 5 minus negative 4. Just watch your signs. It's going to change the plus to positive. So we get x to the 9th power. The second option is to say, oh, let me do the negative rule first. The negative rule says I have to move that up. So it would be x to the 5th power and x to the 4th power would move up. And then since now we're multiplying, you would add those together. So it's going to be x to the 9th power as well. So you kind of have two different options as these get a little bit more complicated. Alright, these last two problems are probably the trickiest of all of them. So when you look at 7, just make sure we're multiplying here. So big numbers, we still do that operation. 5 times 3 is 15. Then with the small ones, the exponents, we need to apply the exponent rule. Here, we're going to add 2 and negative 4 is, or 2 and negative 6 is negative 4. And then with the y's, we also have to add. So this is 5, and this is 1. We're adding because it's multiplying between them, and that's the rule with exponents when you're multiplying, just like we did last week. Now, I cannot leave my final answer like this. To get your final answer, you need to make sure you have no negative exponents in your answer. So to get my final answer, I do have to move that x to the 4th down to the bottom and make it positive. You can't leave any of them negative. You can't leave any of them unhappy. You need to make sure all your exponents are happy by the end of the problem. Alright, and then number 8 is similar to one you saw last week where you have a power outside. You have to make sure you distribute that to everything first. Order of operations says exponents before multiply, so we got to do the power first. So that's 2 to the 3rd power, which is 2 times 2 times 2. That's going to turn into 8. And then when we're doing a power, we're supposed to be multiplying the exponent. So this is to the 6th power. This is to the negative 9th power. And now we can bring the other part of the problem down.
To the main office now.
So now to wrap this one up, we're multiplying. So the big numbers, you multiply, you get negative 40. The small numbers, I'm going to add, since we're multiplying. The exponent rule with multiplication is add. Excuse the noise, I'm just trying to wrap this up. So then the y's, we're also adding. You get y to the negative 5. Your last step here to get your final answer is to just only the negative exponent moves. A negative number doesn't have an exponent rule. The rule is only for the exponent. So that part with the negative exponent would move, and you would get negative 40 x to the 9th y to the 5th. That's your final answer.